Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Conspiracy Farm, where we don't start the conspiracies, we just add the water. And now, your host of the most state-of-the-art, most informed podcast on the interweb, I present to you Pat Miletich and Jeffrey Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for war?
All right, folks, we are off to the races. Another episode, another installment for the archives. The Conspiracy Farm, right here, riding shotgun on this muggy Midwestern day with the champion of champions, Slayer of Dragons, Patrick J. Miletich. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. Glad to have our special guest back for another episode to discuss a very, very tragic event in 2004, September 1st, 2004.
Man.
It happened not here in America, but certainly this man is an expert on anti-terrorism and how to deal with these kind of folks. So it's an honor to have him here.
Absolutely. This, I think, is his fourth time on. He's, very, very popular guest. A lot of feedback on him. He is a friend of the show, former Russian Spetsnaz and just kick-ass human being. Sonny Puzikas, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, Jeff, Pat. Good to see you guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, again, we kind of put this together sort of at the last second. Again, you being so friendly and accommodating with your time. I did see the post that Pat you posted the other day on Beslan, and then Pat, kind of shared it, and I had already kind of been thinking about it, just how, and it was in the back of my mind, weird, just there, and then, what you had said, don't take your eyes away, look at these pictures, and, that is something, obviously, that did happen 14 years ago, starting September 1st, and, ending so tragically, and, it could happen here. If, what are your thoughts on that day, September 1st, 2004, the things that kind of led up to it, if you will, and just your thoughts?
The political climate between the Chechens and Russia and everything else.
What was that, Pat? I couldn't hear you.
Just because of the political climate between the state of Chechnya and Russia, and there was just a lot of stuff going on at the time.
Yeah, well, September 1st overall in former Soviet Union and Russia, in all those territories, it's a big day. It's a standard throughout the country, everywhere, September 1st being a first day of school.
Right.
And
the day of knowledge, right?
It's the day of knowledge. It's a celebration. I mean, people really prepare for it. It's not just, buying school supplies. For a lot of kids, it's a big deal. It really is a big deal. And it is, for lack of a better term, it is a kind of like national holiday type of day.
Okay.
And, the region where Beslan is located, which is Ossetia, it's neighboring with Chechnya. So it's on the foothills of Caucasus Mountains. And obviously, back in those days, 2004, most of the major Chechen so-called rebellion commanders were still alive. Most of them are not anymore.
Huh.
And it was pre-planned event. It was for sure pre-planned event. A lot of stuff was pre-staged. So there was some collaboration with someone locally who has sympathetic to their cause.
Really?
And, yeah. They had weapons pre-staged in school. Some of the weapons were pre-staged in school.
They said that people dressed as janitors did that, right?
It was done during the summer recess because they were doing some renovations at the school. So someone from the construction crews placed things there. And so almost 1,200 people. Parents with kids, not only kids that were going to school, a lot of fathers, mothers, they would bring their infant kids to celebrate their big sisters or brothers' first day in school or whatnot.
Right.
And, that's when they rolled up in a truck. I believe they immediately killed one or two police officers that were there, basically at the front, and they herded all the people inside. Within first 10, 15 minutes, they killed a number of people, and mainly it wasn't because someone was actively resisting. It was basically, from what I was told, selective who they perceived as a possible troublemaker.
Right. Potential physical threat also probably, right?
Yeah. So they eliminated those who they felt could be someone who may try to do something, to disrupt their plans.
Right.
So there were some fathers, there were some male teachers that were killed, and basically that's how it all started. In the morning of September 1st.
2004.
Then from there, 2004.
Just to give a little, I'm sorry, just to give a little bit more background. I mean, the guy, the organization, the guy that started this, talking about the political climate leading up to it, I believe, and I'm going to massacre a few of these names, and I apologize, no disrespect. Ali Kodov was the leader of this particular group that did this, and what was it? Prior to Beslan, in 1995, Chechen rebels took a hospital. 150 were dead. 2002, 900 hostages in a movie theater. 129 dead. So this is the same guy that organized these particular terrorist attacks and now moved into with the children at the school.
Yeah, well, the organizers, so to speak, the click word here is the masterminds behind it. The main person behind all of this was Shamil Basayev.
Yeah.
And he was the most notorious of Chechen leaders. He was the one who was actually on the ground leader during the Budonovsk hospital takeover that you mentioned in 1995. And Shamil Basayev, for all of my American friends and all of the Americans that listen, this is a very important lesson. Shamil Basayev was trained by Soviet Special Forces as a proxy fighter.
Right. Sounds familiar.
To fight in today's Georgia, in Abkhazia. So Shamil was trained in the same base where I was trained, outside of Moscow in Balashikha. It's going to be a big shock to many. I've actually met the guy in person back in those days.
Yeah.
And this is how proxies turn. Especially when you have proxy that has very different worldview, very different ideology. Their loyalty is never guaranteed, and most likely they will turn around. And Shamil Basayev definitely turned around and then some.
And for the Americans that can't even follow what you're saying, that translates to the Mujahideen that we trained to fight the Russians in Afghanistan, who turned around and did 9/11.
Absolutely,
right.
And all the new allies that we're trying to create in Libya, with the new allies that we tried to create, late Senator John McCain in Syria, and many other places, that shit will come back to bite us. Mark my words.
And it has. And Ambassador Stevens felt the pain of that.
Yep. And but the scary part is that it will come back to bite us here on the home turf.
Yeah.
And that's, fortunately, again, I don't know how much of your listeners know, but Shamil Basayev met his demise under very mysterious circumstances. A few years later, it was actually a pretty interesting story about it, because according to official news, which the newscasters in Russia were always telling on the live TV with a kind of mischievous smile on their face, that Shamil Basayev's caravan of few vehicles was hit by a missile. And he was killed and the whole caravan was obliterated. And interesting enough that local law enforcement in that area were all woken up in the middle of the night. They cordoned off like 5 square kilometers, kept it cordoned off for hours. Only then they heard the explosions, and lo and behold, after that big missile hit, on Russian TV, they showed a perfectly preserved, severed head of Shamil Basayev. No burns on him, nothing.
Wow.
So sounds like he outlived his usefulness to the cabal.
He pushed buttons too far, and he met his end. So. He bit
the hand of the masters, didn't he?
Sorry, Pat. For some reason, I hear Jeff very well, but not you so much.
He bit the hand of his masters.
That's one ththing. Shamil Basayev, he was hunted in Russia for many, many years. He took the same kind of moves like his predecessor, Ibn al-Khattab, who was a close friend of one Osama bin Laden. He was one of the leaders in Chechnya as well. He was actually from the same area in Yemen as Osama's family originated from. So they did not use any electronic means of communications. Everything was through messengers of handwritten notes and all that. So they did take very serious precautions not to be found. But it's just a matter of time. Russians are patient.
And going back, to the actual event that day, when the school was surrounded, I mean, they were just wiring explosives, 3 different stages of explosives through the, in the gymnasium. They had herded all these kids into the gymnasium. I had heard there was a couple of possible females that were there that had suicide vests, and then just watching a couple documentaries, they had said some of the younger captors were nicer to them, nicer to the hostages, and then apparently a couple of the girls just wound up disappearing, and some of the conjecture is that even though they were part of the operation, they didn't realize that children were the targets, and they supposedly were eliminated, blown up, or something like that.
There's a lot of stories coming out. Again, when you think about it, what was going on in there, the stories coming in of hostages themselves, and it's not in any way slap towards people that find themselves in situations like that, but their objectivity of how they report of what happened is also affected by what they lived through, so as far as some people from that group, from the hostage takers that at first might have shown under circumstances that might have seen as some sort of compassion or whatnot, there are other stories that that was shown towards specific young females who were then taken and raped.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot to be said about, the witness accounts. I can tell you this, that witnesses in the very traumatic, severe accounts like that are not necessary, so to speak, from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, the most accurate.
There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of assumption. There's a lot of emotional, factors involved in there that you have to be objective, and it's not easy because these people went through pure hell. They went through pure hell.
And this lasted for a total of 3 days, right? And by day 2, they weren't allowing any medication in, any food, any water, anything like that. So by day 3, Russian Special Forces and I hear some fathers even of the children that were in there, everybody went in, and there were children that had wires around their necks to explosives on the basketball hoops, up high in the air so that the shrapnel would come down on all the kids and the remaining adults and things like that. It ended up killing 334 people. 187 children were killed in this. But from your account, can you tell us how this was approached by the special forces, by the groups that eventually had to insert themselves into the gymnasium to try and stop this?
Okay, there's a lot of misconceptions about what happened, how it went, and
right.
Why did the Alpha and Wimpel groups of KGB stormed the way they did. Here's the thing. September 1st, yes, pretty much it was initial stage of the whole hostage takeover. It took hours before, again, realize that Beslan is about a good 1,000 miles away from Moscow. Wimpel and Alpha are based outside of Moscow. Those are the two so-called elite units that participated in the takeover.
Okay.
They were flown in on the 1st, but that was towards the end of the day. Throughout the night, they were setting up mock-up school outside of Beslan for, basically script the operation and work it and so forth. On the September 2nd, there was actually one specific member of Russian parliament who was allowed to go into school, try to negotiate with the hostage takers. He was shown a lot of things. He is originally from that Caucasus region. He is from that area. So I'm not saying he was trusted by the hostage takers, but they would have not talked to anybody else but him.
Apparently he was a little bit more sympathetic to the cause. I'm going to massacre the name, but Aslamabak Azla Kanan, something like that?
Yes. I wouldn't say sympathetic. He was more he was not hot-headed. You know what I mean? He's actually a smart guy. He was much liked in Russia overall. He was, if I'm not mistaken about his background, he was either a writer or he was some kind of a pretty known public person before he became a member of parliament.
Okay.
So anyway, when they brought him in on September 2nd, they walked him through the school. He saw the room with 21 dead bodies. That were parents and teachers that were killed prior. So there were already over 20 dead people before the storm started. That was September 2nd. Apparently after that, there were more killings. This is human thing, when you're in a small group of 30 plus people, as a hostage takers were, and you have to stay up and vigilant for 3 days, you will start taking supplements.
Yeah.
Those guys were drugging themselves pretty heavily.
Okay.
Pretty heavily, with some heavy stuff. Yes, there were 2 females, so-called Black Widows.
So what kind of drugs? What kind of drugs would they be taking? Meth, cocaine, what?
It was more of a European or Central Asian form of meth.
Okay.
It was definitely uppers.
Yeah.
Definitely uppers.
Right.
And September 3rd, and yes, Jeffrey, you're correct. On the first day, for a few hours at least, apparently they allowed children to use bathrooms and all that stuff. After that, they were not allowed to leave. They were not allowed to use bathrooms. There was no water. There are many accounts, and I have no reason to question it, that children were begging adults, not only their own parents, but other adults, to piss in the bottles so they could drink.
That's what I heard from one account. One woman was talking about her son pissed in a bottle and just gulped it down.
Yes, there's a lot of accounts like that where one of the older gentlemen, he said, it's kind of a tear-jerking thing, when he says, 6-year-old boy comes up and basically begs him, take a piss. I need to drink.
Jesus.
Things like that. It's when you look at dehumanizing kids, this is taking to a whole different fucking level.
Yeah.
And so when people, we just use this cliche term, terrorism, hostage taking. This goes so much deeper. This goes to levels of fucking evil that's just raw. It's just absolutely freaking raw. So anyway, the way the operation started, it was not planned yet to start. They were still in the process of trying to negotiate. They were still in the process of exploring other venues. There was whether it was negligent or accidental, whatever you want to call it, one of the explosives in the gymnasium went off. From what I understand, a couple stories corroborated that, but that one of the dead man switches malfunctioned. And one of the explosives went off. Okay, at that point, Alpha Group, they were about a few kilometers away training on the mock-up. Majority of Wimpel Group were on the premises in case.
Okay.
And that's why majority of Special Forces guys that were killed were from Wimpel Group and not from Alpha, because they ran in first.
Was there a contingent of armed fathers? I saw in a couple documentaries and read a little bit that there was a lot of armed people there that stormed it as well.
In that region, it's not every family has a car, every family has a rifle. Caucasus region has been at war for years.
Right.
Regions of Ossetia, Ingushetia, Dagestan, other areas that are neighboring Chechnya, pretty much everybody is armed. Another thing about people in that region are they very, very hot-blooded. They're short-tempered, extremely short-tempered. Italians have nothing on them. Italians are very cool and composed and all that. People there, not so much. It's like a freaking can of gasoline. Yeah. It just needs a match. So trying to contain those fathers that many of them not necessarily had any training or even proper equipment or whatnot from trying to run in and try to save their children, that was another whole, separate hell that law enforcement and cops that were establishing the cordoned off area had to deal with. Obviously, when the explosion went off, many of them basically, zero shits given, just ran towards the school.
Yeah.
Some of them got shot immediately out through the windows. you know. So it was basically mayhem. The way it started was not as a planned hostage rescue operation. It was a random explosion that triggered everyone basically running there and trying to save who they could.
Right.
But because it seems like around that time, and my timeline might be a little messed up, I think it was in that second or third day, they had another negotiator, I think his name was Ruslan Ashvev or something to that effect, that went in and got their demands of, it was a litany of things, but one of the main ones was Russia getting out of Chechnya. And it sounded like the Russian government was like, we can take care of all these different these demands, but we just, the one about getting out of Chechnya was just absolutely unreasonable and just not going to happen.
You know, in Russia, here's the saying, and it's something, and I'm going to paraphrase. It's from one of the speeches that Vladimir Putin gave many, many years ago. And actually, I think that was the speech given prior to Beslan, after one of the other events. And he said, we value every single life of a Russian citizen, but the state will not be placed on its knees by threatening lives of our citizens. Because when the state gets on its knees, the state can no longer protect its citizens.
Yeah, that's the green light for them to take more and more hostages.
You know, so basically the demands of getting out of Chechnya, they knew they never going to be met. They knew it. No sane person would go like, oh yeah, Putin's going to fold over and pull out of Chechnya. Are you fucking kidding? No, it wasn't going to happen, because Chechnya, if they didn't finish what they finished now in Chechnya, Chechnya would have been 10 times worse than what Afghanistan has become. You know, that was existential threat to state of Russian Federation, what was going on in Chechnya.
Right. Let me ask you, and this is, I've tried to wonder how to phrase this without sounding like I'm sympathizing with these people who did this, and I don't know how this exactly turned out, kind of a Stockholm syndrome or whatever went down with the this asshole, Ali Kodov, who was one of the leaders apparently on the ground outside of the gentleman you spoke about earlier. Not gentleman, I've got to stop saying that. Basayev. So there was a lady in there, was a teacher, an older teacher, a mother, Larissa Kudzeva, massacring the name. But she got to talking to him after a while, and she was like, what are you doing, man? There's children here. And his response to her was, Russia's been killing our children in worse ways in our villages for years, and there's been no sympathy. Now, obviously, I'm not rationalizing this behavior, but what are your thoughts on, not just here in this area, but the blowback from these wars, Afghanistan, Iraq, et cetera, which outside of us creating certain terror, there is legitimate blowback because people have lost their mothers, their daughters, their sisters, et cetera. Again, not to rationalize his behavior, but what are your thoughts on his...
Jeff, stop apologizing about rationalizing it. It's absolutely on-point observation. It's absolutely on-point observation. When we start wars, when we get involved in conflicts, to expect that we're not going to be seen as an enemy is fucking madness. It's madness. We will be seen as enemies. Okay? So this is not about rationalizing. This is just cold objectivism. When we start or get involved in action, fighting other people, you know, it's to me, it's very simple. Do I understand why they did what they did? Yes. Do I understand their feelings about many of them losing family members, loved ones, fathers, brothers during the war? Yes. Do I justify it? No, I understand it. Here's the simple thing. I know which side of this conflict I'm on.
Yeah.
That's it. Now, do I justify everything that was done in Chechnya? Do I justify what we're doing in Iraq or Afghanistan? Absolutely no. You know, but does it mean that I will have some kind of justification for when they blow up the school or maternity ward in Philadelphia? Absolutely not. You know what I mean? And that's the sad part when government has a carte blanche to start shit, and it's not the government that will be suffering.
Right. Yeah. No.
It's not the government that will be suffering. You know, it's us. It's people. It's our kids. It's our families, loved ones, teachers, fucking workers from the 110th floor, whatever the case might be. And you know, again, what these Chechens are saying, you know, Russia has been killing us for this and this and that. First of all, Chechen conflict was a lot more than Chechens versus Russians. Second of all, as far as killings and all that, many Russians can, with just as much justification, say, you are the guys who also are coming to Moscow and Budonovsk and other cities blowing up, not going after military targets, not going after, you know what I mean?
Right. Soft targets, of course.
Yeah, and it's not like, per se, Russian military on purpose was going after soft targets and attacking Chechen schools.
Yeah.
It is well-known fact that many of the insurgencies will use soft targets as a shield to conduct their operations. It's been happening forever. It's been in history since fucking BC.
Right.
Insurgencies have used soft targets, soft installations with civilians as a shield to conduct their missions, and that's that. So I hear what you're saying, Jeff, and don't be apologetic that I know you're not justifying it, but what he says, we have to take it at the face value that yes, there will be consequences for wars that we get involved.
And to bring this into focus for Americans, we have to go back just a few weeks to where a makeshift compound in the desert in the Southwest had been put together by Islamic extremists. The son of a very extreme cleric out in the Southwest was taking children and teaching them how to conduct school massacres, and there was a 3 or 4 year old boy's body was found there that they had killed during some sort of crazy ass Islamic ritual or something, satanic ritual. And it was this guy's son actually who they found dead. But the scary part of this is, and this is where we have to try and figure out the bigger scope of this, take the 1,000-foot view instead of just that portion of it, is that compound was bulldozed literally a day or two later. We don't know how much investigation was done. The prosecuting attorney was late filing his charges against these people. Charges were dropped. I think that charges were refiled against them. But nonetheless, 3 people, I think, were released who were part of that whole thing. So I'm sitting here saying to myself, was this a CIA false flag operation getting put together to cause more false flag shootings in schools? What the hell was this thing? Sonny, what's your take on that?
You know what? It's hard to say. There's there are places throughout the United States of compounds of, things happening.
Many compounds.
Many. Dozens
Yes.
and dozens and dozens, including here in Texas. There are a few of them here.
Yeah.
And, we are afraid to take a hard look because it's going to be seen as, be it a racism or whatever the hell.
Islamophobia,
whatever newest label the lefties will try to hang on people that talk about this. But here's the thing. It's the simple fact. There are people here in the United States that don't like us. Now, quite a bit of it is justified, yes. We made ourselves hated in many areas of the world. Does that justify them training people to conduct school shootings, hostage takings?
Not at all.
Mass murders? Absolutely not.
Right.
Absolutely not. Some people will get on the moral high horse and go like, well, what other resources do they have? They don't have their own State Department to negotiate. They don't have their political clout and power and money and influence and all that stuff. Okay, I hear you. I mean, I'm really tired of not being able to drive that Ferrari that I always wanted. So I guess it's time for me to rob the bank, right? Because I just don't have clout, power, and connections to make the $260,000 needed for that Ferrari, right?
Right.
I mean, the logic is pretty interesting when we justify, freedom of speech, First Amendment. It's speech. It's opinion. When you pick up the weapons to hurt mine, to hurt yours, to commit murder, this is not about your rights, your First Amendment or whatnot. At that point, it's very simple. It's fucking you against fucking me.
Yeah. Right. So then we have to look at our friend and billionaire in Pennsylvania, our Turkish friend, who is hanging out over there and has been funding quite a few of these. And we know that if this was Russia and these compounds were going on, Putin would have them annihilated, flattened, and everybody in them dead, most likely. Am I correct?
You are correct.
Right. So we'll just go back to the
Fethullah Gulen.
Fethullah Gulen, who's sitting in Pennsylvania, the billionaire who's been funding some terrorist organizations.
Yeah, running charter schools under the guy, basically training terrorists and indoctrinating them under the guise of charter schools. I mean, again, like you said, it's been going on, not just using soft targets, but this kind of like using proxies has been going on for quite a while. And, you know, it's gross, man. It's really gross. And I've wondered that too about the Beslan situation. Was there any element of that you felt, any element of that you felt was inside jobbish, or were these legit hardcore Chechen Islamic fundamentalist rebels that, you know, really wanted to cause some trouble? Do you feel there was any element of proxy to that? I guess the gentleman you mentioned before, I forget his name. I'm sorry. The guy who got beheaded.
Shamil Basayev.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if he was kind of running game with CIA, NATO, anything like that. Do you feel any involvement like that with the Beslan stuff?
You know what? It's. I haven't heard, and I do have friends in high places up there. I haven't heard any rumblings about them having any kind of suspicion that this was some kind of a deeper job. Now, that's not to say that within Russian circles of influence there were no sympathizers, there were no financial backers. There were. One of them is late Boris Berezovsky. You know, remember the case in England where someone drank some tea with the polonium and so that gentleman was working for Boris Berezovsky. Boris Berezovsky single-handedly is the one person most responsible for the first Chechen war in 84-85. He was in exile, political asylum in the United Kingdom, and then a few years later, after the radioactive polonium poisoning, Boris Berezovsky hung himself in his own shower. So they meet their end.
Yeah.
You know, they do.
Whether he hung himself or not.
That's pure speculation.
When I even heard some of the negotiating tactics towards the end was you give up some children, please, you know, out of the school, and we'll release certain rebels who've been imprisoned. And part of their rationale was like, yeah, we'll release them. We're going to find them here as soon as we release them. It's not like they're going to run off into the sunset. We're going to find their asses.
Yeah, they were willing to negotiate to a certain degree about exchanging people and all that. And some children, small number of children, were released to one of those parliamentarians. I think they released like 10 mothers with 12 children.
Yes, yeah.
I believe it was on the day 2. There were a couple cases where, because again, school is pretty big, there were some kids that were able somehow to escape. So there were, throughout those 3 days, there were things happening. At the same time, there were rapes happening. More people were being killed. So it was a very multi-dimensional situation, you know, and I love it when I hear the critics talking about it, you know, well, if our boys, if Delta or DevGru were there, you know, they would have done it this and that. Look, man, when unexpectedly the explosion goes off and you know that dozens and dozens were killed and probably more about to die.
You got to
go. This is not the time to take 6 hours and go like, all right, so 6 guys go there, 4 guys go there, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to send in the robots and all that stuff. No, you pick up your fucking AK and you run and you fight for the lives of others.
Right. Yeah.
That's what it was. So it wasn't like this initiated by Russians hostage rescue mission. It was initiated attempt to save as many as possible due to explosion going off in the gymnasium.
Right. So, and that's human instinct, no matter how highly trained you are, when you know and hear those screams and that explosion goes off and you know there's carnage, it's go time. It's go time no matter what.
It is go time, you know what? And no commander would try to stop his troops because he would be fucking shot. Because most of those troops are also fathers.
Yeah.
You know, few of the friends that I lost there, you know, they were fathers. One of them was father of 4 himself and covered other kids and got shot by a sniper, you know. So when you think about as a man, as a true male, you hear something like that, you know it's kids, you're going to go. You're going to go. It's not bravado. It's not being a hero at that time. It's simple human
instinct.
Yeah.
Man instinct to save those who need saving, who rely on your protection.
Right.
And it's interesting to see how it ended. You know, I didn't necessarily see a good ending to that anyway, but watching the chaos of that moment, of that explosion actually going off, I mean, that just, I don't know, for somewhat of a term, curveball the whole situation. That's why I heard you saw the police, you saw dads, it just created absolute chaos of that third day really coming to a head. Hearing this story of children not being able to go to the bathroom, not having water. I mean, I just cannot, all of it. I can't even imagine the situation. But that third day, just the fucking just unthinkable chaos at that moment.
Yeah, man, it was outside of anyone's control. And those guys did the best they could, 10 of the good guys, going in were killed. I mean, they were working against incredible odds.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, out of 1,200 hostages, 334 have perished. Well, 324 because the other 10 were the soldiers.
Okay.
You're looking at the 30% loss ratio. No matter how you look at it, it beats 100% loss ratio.
Yeah,
absolutely. And let's fast forward now to the United States of America, 2018. Here we are in September, 14th anniversary of Beslan. What can Americans, all those Americans out there, and you alluded to it in your Facebook post about, don't call bullshit on me carrying a weapon, especially when I carry a weapon to a place where it's not supposed to be carried, on school grounds, because I'm picking up my child, because if all hell breaks loose, because we know shooters either go when the kids are going into school or coming out of school. They can get them all in one big group. Americans need to know how to fight. Americans need to have a basic understanding of how to operate weapons. Sonny, with your training, you can pick up any goddamn weapon on the planet and know how it works. But for the average American, they'll pick up a gun, and the simplest gun, and have no clue how it works. And it's a very sad state of affairs in my mind.
And in addition to that, as you answered, the likelihood, you do that because of the potential and likelihood of violence. What are your thoughts on something like this happening here in America?
I know it's a kind of stale cliche. It's not the matter if, it's the matter when. It will happen. I'm not some kind of a doomsday conspiracy theorist or whatnot. It will happen. We have enemies. They either hated us for whatever reason. We created more of them that hate us for our involvement, and we allowed them to come in relatively freely. And majority of population, including male population, has been neutered. Majority of population sleeps with the pink sunglasses on, thinking that state, military, police, courts will protect them. And, people look at events like Beslan, like Budonovka, like the theater siege in Moscow, like many other things that we don't talk much about. Look how many of these hostage situations and mass killings have happened in the Middle East.
Yeah. Right.
Muslims killing Muslims.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's not that they hate America. Okay? They have ideology that tells them that the path where they need to go, what they need to do to achieve their goals. And people think that there are no skilled people, armed people capable of planning, that do have such political or ideological views as folks in Beslan had here in America. Pat mentioned the New Mexico thing, right? That's one small example. That's one small example out of many that have been prevented. How many we haven't heard of, and how many of them have not been caught, have not been found.
Right. And now you alluded to also what I'm so sick of hearing, frankly, is these lunatic leftists talking about toxic masculinity. And so the way I see it, and I'm back to that 1,000-foot view of a situation, and some people think I'm completely crazy for it, but to me it's crystal clear. When Colin Kaepernick's girlfriend excuse me, who's friends with Linda Sarsour, who's connected to the Muslim Brotherhood within the United States, is a hardcore leftist who, the leftist Marxist ideology and the Islamic extremists are hinged at the hip until they destroy this country. And then what? Will they fight for the remnants then at that point? I don't know, but they're all fucking lunatics. But the point that I'm making is Linda Sarsour talks Colin Kaepernick into kneeling at a football game when his contract wasn't even going to be renewed to stir up some shit, thinking that she's explaining to him, I can see it all go down now. If you kneel, cause a bunch of shit, get signed, cause a bunch of controversy, go to a different team. But here's the thing. This is an attack on something. The NFL is a major cornerstone to the whole vision of what masculinity is supposed to be in the United States. Big, strong, physical men smashing the shit out of each other. And if we destroy the NFL, we destroy masculinity, a big chunk of it. And now it goes even further with Disney-owned ESPN. I watched ESPN implode because I worked at ESPN when it all went down. When Disney bought ESPN, it was no longer about sports. It was about what you did in your fucking bedroom, which nobody gives a shit about, frankly. And so there's nothing but brochures and everything else about, alternative sexuality, which I don't give a shit what you do in your bedroom. But we watched ESPN self-implode, and now ESPN has signed the UFC, and you watch ESPN and Disney destroy another symbol of masculinity in this country, the UFC.
Well, Pat, you are one of the icons of toxic masculinity, So we are dangerous like that, my man. So
yes.
that's you know what? I'm proud of being toxic male. I'm proud of being toxic male, and I'm gonna work till my last breath to create more toxic males.
I love it.
The ones that can fight, the ones that can think for themselves, the ones that provide for their families, that don't wait for help, will accept help but will not wait for it.
Right.
The ones that, actually appreciate women for what women are, our better halves.
Right.
We chase that skirt until we find the right one. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And I'm teaching my boy like this, and I'm gonna make him into a very, very toxic male. And here's the thing, man. Like you were saying, they going on after institutions that are symbols of traditional life.
Right. Thank you.
Where it's not better or worse. It's not.
Froze. You froze for a sec, Sonny? Countdown.
Says communication lost. We are trying to get Sonny back. What are you doing to try and get Sonny back right now?
Damn it.
There he is. All right, we got you back, buddy. All right, good. So they're
Am I back?
Yeah, you were just saying they attack institutions of masculinity, of what this country stands for, traditional life, everything else.
Yeah, traditional life is dangerous to the leftist Marxist way of life. It's they don't want people that are objective thinkers. They don't want people that are not reliant on government. It's kind of like reading the 10 points of Saul Alinsky, on which, by the way, Hillary Clinton wrote her dissertation, right?
Yes.
It's like a perfect following of fucking Marxist manifesto. And that's what they're doing step by step. It's death by thousand cuts. If American folks don't recognize that earlier on, we're gonna have to start seeing some red running down the streets trying to preserve what America should be.
It's interesting you say that, and I think I mentioned this to you in one of our previous podcasts with you, where a friend of mine who spent a lot of years with Naval Special Warfare said, look, man, with all these leftists and all these freeloaders, I don't know, 50 million of them, how many of them are there at this point? And he said, and he smiles. He has that smile. And he goes, you either give them what they want, or the alternative is you fucking get rid of them. And that's the alternative. And he goes, and you're going to relate to this. Look, I was never a special forces guy. I'm a basic caveman. I can kick most people's asses with my hands. Probably do pretty decent with knives. Better than the average guy with guns, but I'm no friggin' phenomenal badass special forces guy by any means. But you'll be able to relate to the way he put this. He goes, look, if CW2 Civil War II kicks off, he goes, you know what I'll be fucking happy because I'm gonna run that shit. and you know you can relate to that mentality because it's guys like you guys that are gonna go, you fuck with me, you're all dead, right?
It's on.
No, at this point, this is what, you know, America is based on fucking individual freedoms and liberties.
Right.
This is where they don't understand the leftists. They pushing to take not America, they pushing to take away individual freedoms and liberties, which is the fucking foundation of America.
Right.
And they pushing individuals. They're not pushing some collective. They're pushing individuals. When those individuals like that guy, thousands of others, myself, and although I'm Russian and all that stuff, guess what? America is my home. This is my fucking country.
Right.
You know, when they're gonna push us to collective action, they may not like what they will see.
If they see it at all, because they won't fucking see it coming.
You know, it's here's the thing, man. Most of people in these circles, you know, like yourself, Pat, like you know, fighters, people that seen some life. We are not violent people. Actually, we are probably some of the most tolerant freaking people.
Yeah.
You know, we can forgive a lot.
Right.
We can forget a lot. But we have, you know, we're not like Obama. When we say there is a line in the sand, I mean it.
Yeah.
I fucking mean it. You know, and they slowly pushing closer to that line. They're not there yet, but they're slowly pushing towards it.
In the words of the late great Tupac Shakur, I'm not a killer, but don't push me.
There you go.
And I honestly, we've talked about this before, and even our last episode, we've talked about this many times on the show. You know, civil unrest, like we're talking about, civil war just doesn't happen overnight. There's a slow conditioning over the course of years, if not longer, to begin to see your enemy no longer as a human being. And I think we're really getting to that point, not necessarily overnight Civil War II, but we're talking about collectives.
Media's doing a great job of it.
Well, and that you have your collectives trying to speak and take away individual rights, and I think that's just going to be a huge. And we're reaching almost a precipice where we have this, you know, group think, and then you have individuals, and there's a clash coming. It seems like.
No, it's you're absolutely correct, Jeff. It's you know, when what we're talking about now, you know, I know you guys know it and you realize that, but in the eyes of millions and millions, this is hate speech. What we're saying to them is a hate speech.
Right.
And to me, that right there is a clear indicator that significant segments of population are no longer, you know,
reasonable.
They're no longer Americans. I hate to say it like this. They're no longer Americans.
And I, you know, it's crazy you say that. I mean, that's so very true. These individuals who are running about and talking about anti-fascist are behaving in the most fascist manner. I don't like what you're saying, so you can't come speak at this college. You know, yeah. I identify as XYZ, so I'm going to impose my language onto you. I mean, this is kind of what you're talking about, the stripping away of all these things, these traditions we've had, and, you know,
it's kind of like
hijacking biology. I'm sorry?
I will not tolerate your intolerance.
Right.
What the fuck? I will not tolerate your intolerance.
That's exactly right.
You know, and the thing is, it's funny. You see, you know, a pro free speech march or rally, and Antifa shows up. Antifa comes with baseball bats and steel rods and all kinds of other stuff, and decides to attack these guys. They get beat up in about 3 minutes and take off running. Those, when I look at the guys throwing punches from the pro Trump side or pro freedom, pro you know, constitutional side. There's no trained fighters in that crowd whatsoever. There's no special forces guys. They haven't even gotten to the guys that are really going to do damage yet.
Oh no, the people that are capable of serious action are still sitting back.
Yeah,
are still sitting back, and
being very patient.
Just like Jeff says, don't push us.
Yeah.
Don't push us, because, you know, we are actually very tolerant people, because I tell you, man, shit like that, if it was going down in some other countries, you would not be tolerated for your actions. you would not be tolerated for your actions.
Yeah, truly.
People here, Americans are very tolerant.
Yeah,
I mean that is a great plus and a great tragedy of America.
Yeah, if you saw if Putin got reelected or elected, and there were Antifa activists burning shit and blowing stuff up and doing what they were doing in Washington D.C. If they were doing that in downtown Moscow, they would have got wrecked on the spot.
Well, as British soccer fans find out that Moscow police is not the same as London police. You know?
I saw that. Did you see that?
I didn't. What happened?
Oh, British soccer fans got their asses
they decided
kicked.
they're going to jump on the police car in Moscow. Well, they find out pretty quickly that Moscow cops are not London cops.
They got fucking wrecked.
Not the Bobbies. Well, before we let you slide, and I just let me.
Yeah, talk about your trainings coming up.
No, hold on.
Okay.
Before going back to Beslan, before we round out on Beslan, what are your thoughts? April 4th, 2017, the European Courts on Human Rights ordered Russian government to pay $3.2 million to the Beslan victims.
Yeah, I think that we should start a petition to European Court to order U.S. government to pay $3.2 million to each of the parent of the children killed in that South Florida school, because they did not prevent it. They didn't do anything, and FBI knew about it with 32 fucking notes.
Yeah.
Of the name of the guy, who he is, where he is, and all that stuff. So
and
how
50
about
phone
that?
calls.
Right.
How about that? You know what? European Court, people will say that this probably has a monkey, racial undertones. It's a monkey court. It has nothing to do with racism. These are clowns that are so far removed from realities of life, so far up their own rectums with their ideological posturing, that taking anything they say for 1 penny's worth is a fucking joke.
Right. Jeffrey?
No, I'm with it. I found that odd. The Russian government now has to pay out. Per what you said, why?
I don't think the Russian government has to pay shit.
They won't.
I'm sure they didn't. I mean, who knows if they did? I don't know, but it's like using that analogy of like, why didn't the U.S. government, pay out families for Parkland? It, obviously. Regardless, that was a very just beyond tragic event, man. As a father of an 11-year-old daughter, doing show prep and watching these shows for this, it just is. It just freaks me out, man, and it ruins those kids almost for the rest of their life. Their childhood is gone, and to imagine the terror and the shit they went through for those 3 days, it's just mind numbing, man.
Yeah, to the credit of filmmakers, there are a couple good shows. The 3 Days in September is one of them.
Yep.
There was an HBO special called Children of Beslan. If you can find that, it's pretty freaking powerful.
Yeah.
And then there are quite a few shows and documentaries in the Russian language that you cannot get. At least I haven't seen translated versions, but
okay.
I watched it, and I talked to a number of people that were there on all 3 days, and this event, this is not just because it has extra emotional load to it because it involves children, but the ruthlessness of this, the how raw the evil can be, I think this one takes the cake.
Be prepared.
Yeah, and again, not to kind of circle back too far, but the blowback from so much stuff that's been going on, like you said, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. So per what you've done and per what Pat does, we've talked about it, training for violence, the potential for violence. That doesn't mean it's like an insurance policy. You buy fire insurance, you don't expect your house to be burnt down, but just in case it does, you are prepared. Talk to us a little bit about forward training concepts and what that does to help prepare you and the people who come see you for these potentialities.
Okay, well, forward training concepts is what I do, is what I teach. I teach violence. I teach good people how to do bad things to bad people. That's really all there is to it. With your bare hands and your bare feet, with any tools that you may find, improvised weapons to edged weapons to blunt weapons to firearms. I am of a belief now that civilians not only need, but they absolutely deserve the same or higher level of training as military and law enforcement. I pulled all the plugs. There's nothing that I won't teach civilians that I used to teach to military spec ops. Nothing.
Yeah.
That's just it, because you know what? Individual citizen is the ultimate minority. That's what I believe, and that's what it is.
Right. Yeah.
And it's the most oppressed minority in this country and everywhere else. So I teach combative, hand-to-hand stuff. I call it, my new programs, I call it Fight Hacker. It's kind of a little different approach to rewire yourself. I kind of made this little funny meme just to kind of expand a little bit on that. I said, paraphrasing JFK, ask not what your enemy can do to you. Ask what can you do to your enemy.
Yes.
I love that, dude.
Yes.
That needs to be put on a T-shirt.
Yeah, you have that on T-shirts?
It's actually in the works, Jeffrey. Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, I need one.
We need to order those.
Yes.
Hey, so your website, where can we order that stuff?
Yes, it's www.sonnypuzikas.com, SONNYPUZIKAS.com. I'm also present on social media under the same name, or you can look up on YouTube, Forward Training Concepts or Sonny Puzikas, and get the information there.
Yeah, and same on you obviously same on Facebook as well. You often go live with kind of segments of information, tutorials, just breaking stuff down. So you got multiple platforms you can track down Mr. Sonny Puzikas. Man, on this, we're just a day past 14 years ago that, such a ridiculous, horrific travesty and tragedy took place. I really, really value and appreciate your time and giving your insights on this. And I, like you said, you lost friends there. I definitely apologies for that, and so sorry for that. But thanks for your time, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for your knowledge.
Guys, good to see you and hear you both again, and anytime.
All right.
I love what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing, man.
Thank you, sir.
Safe travels.
Yeah, you do the same too. Forward Training Concepts, Sonny Puzikas. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Peace and so much love. Stay tuned. Always, there will be more.